Here's a list of 100 Selenium interview questions covering various topics and levels of difficulty. Selenium basics. What is Selenium? Selenium is an open source automation testing tool primarily used for automating web applications for testing purposes. Explain the differences between Selenium IDE, Selenium RC, WebDriver, and Selenium Grid. Selenium IDE. Firefox plugin used for recording and playing back interactions with the browser. It has limited features and is primarily used for prototyping and learning Selenium. Selenium RC, remote control. The first version of Selenium that allowed executing tests on different browsers is now deprecated. Selenium WebDriver, a successor to Selenium RC, WebDriver provides a more modern and stable approach to browser automation. It supports multiple programming languages and provides a more intuitive API. Selenium Grid, a tool used for running tests in parallel across different machines and browsers simultaneously. What programming languages are supported by Selenium WebDriver? Selenium WebDriver supports multiple programming languages including Java, C#, Python, Ruby, JavaScript, Node.js, and PHP. How does Selenium WebDriver communicate with the browser? Selenium WebDriver communicates with the browser through the WebDriver interface, which sends commands to the browser's native driver using the browser's native support for automation. What is the difference between a find elements in Selenium WebDriver? Find element finds the first web element matching the specified locator on the web page. If no element is found, it throws a no such element exception. Find elements finds all web elements matching the specified locator on the web page. It returns a list of web elements. If no elements are found, it returns an empty list. Explain the difference between implicit wait and explicit wait in Selenium. Implicit wait sets a global wait time for the WebDriver instance wait for elements before throwing an exception. It is applied to all elements in the script. Explicit wait waits for a certain condition to occur before proceeding with the execution. It allows waiting for specific elements with conditions like visibility, presence, or clickability. How do you handle alerts in Selenium WebDriver? Alert equal to driver.switch to alert, string alert text equal to alert.getText, alert accept to accept the alert, or alert.dismiss to dismiss the alert. What are the different types of locators supported by Selenium WebDriver? Locators supported by Selenium WebDriver include ID, name, class name, tag name, link text, partial link text, CSS selector, and XPath. Explain the difference between XPath and CSS selectors. XPath allows locating elements by their XML path. It offers a wide range of options for element selection and traversal. CSS selector allows locating elements based on CSS selectors. It is faster and more readable than XPath in many cases. How do you handle frames in Selenium WebDriver? Switch to frame by index. Driver switch to frame. Switch to frame by name or ID. Driver switch to frame name. Switch to frame by web element. Web element frame element equal to driver.find element by ID frame ID. Driver switch to frame element. Switch back to the default content. Driver.switch to default content. Selenium WebDriver commands. Explain the usage of get and navigate methods in Selenium WebDriver. Navigate to a URL. Driver.get https www.example.com. Navigate back, driver.navigate back. Navigate forward, driver.navigate.forward. Refresh the current page, driver.navigate.refresh. How do you perform drag and drop action using Selenium WebDriver? Web element source element equal to driver.find element by ID source. Web element target element equal to driver.find element by ID target. Actions equal to new actions driver. Actions.drag and drop. Source element, target element, build, perform. What is the purpose of actions class in Selenium WebDriver? The actions class in Selenium WebDriver is used for performing complex user interactions like mouse movements, keyboard events, drag and drop operations, etc. How do you simulate keyboard and mouse actions in Selenium WebDriver? Simulate keyboard actions equal to new actions driver, actions.send keys.enter, build, perform. Simulate mouse hover. Web element equal to driver.find element by id, actions move to element build, perform. How do you handle drop downs in Selenium WebDriver? Select drop down by visible text. Select drop down equal to new select driver find element by id drop down. Drop down select by visible text option 1. Select drop down by value, drop down dot select by value 1. Select drop down by index, drop down dot select by index 0. Explain how to capture screenshots in Selenium WebDriver. Capture screenshot and save to a file. File screenshot equal to take screenshot driver dot get screenshot as output type dot file utils copy file screenshot new file path to save screenshot.png. How do you handle file uploads using Selenium WebDriver? Web element upload element equal to driver.find element by id upload element send keys path to file.text. What is the difference between close and quit methods in Selenium WebDriver? Close What is the difference between close and quit methods in Selenium WebDriver? Close closes the current window. Quit closes all windows opened by the WebDriver instance and terminates the WebDriver session. How do you manage cookies in Selenium WebDriver? Get all cookies, set cookies equal to driver.manage get cookies. Add a new cookie equal to new cookie name, cookie value, driver.manage add cookie, new cookie, delete a cookie, driver.manage delete cookie name, named cookie name. Okay. Explain the usage of WebDriver wait in Selenium WebDriver. WebDriver wait equal to new WebDriver wait driver 10. Web element equal to wait until expected conditions dot visibility of element located by id element id TestNG integration. Why do we use TestNG with Selenium WebDriver? TestNG provides powerful features for testing such as grouping, parameterization, parallel execution, and reporting, which make it well suited for automation testing with Selenium WebDriver. What are the advantages of using TestNG over JUnit? TestNG supports more flexible annotations like before suite, after suite, data provider, etc. TestNG allows grouping of test cases. TestNG supports parameterization. TestNG provides built-in support for parallel execution of test cases. TestNG offers better reporting capabilities. How do you execute test cases in parallel using TestNG? TestNG provides the parallel attribute in the suite tag of the TestNG XML file to execute tests in parallel. You can set it to tests, classes, methods, or instances depending on the level of parallelism desired. What is the purpose of the TestNG XML file in TestNG? The TestNG XML file is a configuration file used to define the test suites, test cases, parameters, listeners, and other settings for the TestNG sets tests. It allows customization of test execution and enables running multiple test classes or methods together. How do you prioritize test cases in TestNG? TestNG allows setting priority for test methods using the priority attribute of the add test annotation. Test methods with lower priority values are executed first. Explain the usage of before suite and after suite annotations in TestNG. At before suite, the method annotated with before suite runs before the execution of all tests in the suite. After suite, the method annotated with the after suite runs after the execution of all tests in the suite. How do you perform a parameterization in TestNG? TestNG supports parameterization using the add parameters annotation and defining parameters in the TestNG XML file. Parameters are passed to test methods as method parameters. What is the data provider in TestNG? How do you use it? Data provider is a feature in TestNG used to supply test data to test methods. It allows running the same test method with different sets of data. You can define a data provider method and specify it in the test annotation at test annotation. How do you perform dependency testing in TestNG? TestNG supports dependency testing using the depends on methods attribute of the at test annotation. You can specify the methods on which a test method depends, ensuring they are executed before the dependent method. Explain the usage of listeners in TestNG. Listeners in TestNG are used to customize and enhance the test execution process. They allow you to perform actions before and after test methods, suites, classes, etc. You can create custom listeners by implementing the TestNG listener interfaces, frameworks, and design patterns. What is page object model in Selenium? Page object model is a design pattern used in Selenium WebDriver for creating an object repository of web pages. It separates the page object from test scripts, making the code more maintainable and reusable. Explain the advantages of using page object model: improved code reusability and maintainability, ease to update and refactor page elements, encapsulation of page details, making test scripts more readable, better separation of concerns between test logic and page structure. How do you implement page object model in Selenium WebDriver? Create separate classes for each web page, define web elements and methods representing actions on the page, encapsulate the page logic within methods, use these page classes in test scripts to interact with web pages. What is TestNG soft assert? How is it different from hard assert? TestNG soft assert allows executing multiple assertions in a test method without terminating the execution on the first failure. It collects all failures and reports them at the end of the test method. Hard assert, on the other hand, stops the test execution immediately upon encountering the first assertion failure. What is the significance of TestNG groups? TestNG groups allow categorizing test methods into logical groups based on functionality, priority, or any other criteria. Groups enable running specific sets of tests together or excluding certain groups from execution, providing flexibility in test execution. What is the data-driven framework in Selenium? The data-driven framework in Selenium involves separating test data from the test logic. Test data is stored in external sources like Excel sheets, CSV files, databases, etc., and tests are executed iteratively for each set of test data. Explain hybrid framework in Selenium WebDriver. A hybrid framework in Selenium combines the features of multiple frameworks like data-driven, keyword-driven, and page object model to leverage their advantages and address specific testing requirements. How do you integrate Selenium WebDriver with Maven? Add Selenium WebDriver dependencies in the pom.xml file. Configure Maven's Surefire plugin to execute TestNG tests. Create a TestNG XML file to define test suites and configurations. Run Maven build commands to compile and execute tests. Explain the significance of page factory in Selenium WebDriver. Page factory is an extension of the page object model pattern in Selenium WebDriver. It provides an efficient way to initialize web elements using annotations like at find by. Page factory reduces code redundancy and improves performance by lazy initialization of web elements. What are the best practices for writing Selenium WebDriver test scripts? Use page object model for better code organization. Implement assertions to verify expected outcomes. Use explicit weights to handle synchronization issues. Parameterize test data to cover different scenarios. Use TestNG features like groups, priorities, and listeners for better test management and reporting. Follow coding standards and maintain clean, readable code. Advanced Selenium concepts. What is the headless browser testing? How do you perform it with Selenium WebDriver? Headless browser testing is a method of running automated tests without a graphical user interface. It's useful for faster test execution and running tests on servers. Example using Chrome headless. Chrome options equal to new Chrome options dot set headless true WebDriver driver equal to new Chrome driver options. How do you handle dynamic elements in Selenium WebDriver? Use explicit weights with conditions like visibility of element located, presence of element located, element to be clickable, etc. to handle dynamic elements. WebDriver weight equal to new WebDriver weight driver 10, web element dynamic element equal to weight dot until expected conditions dot visibility of element located by id dynamic element id. Explain the usage of fluent weight in Selenium WebDriver. Fluent weight is used to configure custom weight with polling frequency and timeout settings. It provides more flexibility in handling dynamic elements. Weight WebDriver weight equal to new fluent weight driver dot with timeout duration of seconds 30, polling every duration of seconds 5, ignoring no such element exception dot class. How do you handle SSL certificate errors in Selenium WebDriver? You can ignore SSL certificate errors using desired capabilities for browser initialization. Desired capabilities equal to desired capabilities dot Chrome capabilities dot set capability type dot accept SSL certificates true WebDriver driver equal to new Chrome driver capabilities. What is the difference between get window handle and get window handles in Selenium WebDriver? Get window handle returns the handle of the current window. Get window handles returns a set of handles of all open windows. How do you perform database testing using Selenium WebDriver? Selenium WebDriver is not designed for direct database testing. You can integrate it with database testing tools or frameworks like JDBC, TestNG, or JUnit for database interactions. What is the robot class in Selenium WebDriver? When is it used? The robot class in Selenium WebDriver is used to generate native system input events like key presses, mouse clicks, and mouse movements. It's used for automating tasks like the uploads or handling system pop ups. How do you handle multiple windows in Selenium WebDriver? Use get window handles to get handles of all open windows and switch between them using switch to window method. Set string window handles equal to driver dot get window handles for string handle window handles driver dot switch to window handle perform actions on the current window. What is the difference between verify and assert commands in Selenium WebDriver? Assert stops the test execution immediately if the assertion fails. Verify continues test execution even if the assertion fails. Explain the usage of WebDriver event listener interface in Selenium WebDriver. WebDriver event listener interface is used to listen to WebDriver events like before click on, after click on, before find by, after find by, etc. It's useful for logging, reporting, or custom actions during test execution. Interview scenarios. How do you handle synchronization issues in Selenium WebDriver? Use explicit weights, fluent weight, or custom synchronization methods to handle synchronization issues caused by page loading, AJAX calls, or dynamic elements. What are the common exceptions in Selenium WebDriver? Some common exceptions include no such element exception, timeout exception, stale element, reference exception, element not interactable exception, etc. How do you handle dynamic web elements that change attributes on refresh? Use dynamic locators like XPath or CSS selectors that can handle changing attributes or values. What strategies do you follow to ensure the stability of your automation scripts? Use reliable locators, implement robust error handling, perform regular maintenance, and follow best practices like page object model parameterization and proper synchronization. How do you identify XPath locators efficiently? Use browser developer tools to inspect elements and generate XPath expressions. Prefer short and concise XPath expressions to improve performance. Explain a situation where you encountered a challenging scenario while automating test case. Describe a specific scenario, the challenges faced, and how you resolved them using appropriate Selenium WebDriver techniques or workarounds. How do you handle JavaScript alerts with Selenium WebDriver? Alert equal driver, switch to alert accept to accept the alert, or alert.dismiss to dismiss the alert. What is the importance of browser profiling in Selenium WebDriver? Browser profiling helps in analyzing browser performance, optimizing test execution, identifying memory leaks, and troubleshooting browser specific issues. How do you handle browser compatibility testing with Selenium WebDriver? Use Selenium Grid to execute tests across different browsers and versions. Implement cross browser testing strategies and analyze test results for compatibility issues. What is your approach to handling flaky tests in Selenium WebDriver? Investigate the root cause of flakiness, optimize test scripts, improve synchronization, and enhance error handling to minimize flakiness. Use retry mechanisms or data driven approaches to handle intermittent failures. Cross browser testing. How do you perform cross browser testing with Selenium WebDriver? Use Selenium Grid to execute tests across different browsers and versions simultaneously. Define desired capabilities for each browser and specify the browser configurations in the TestNG XML file. What is the difference between driver switch to window and driver switch to frame? Driver switch to window used to switch between browser windows or tabs. Driver switch to frame used to switch a frame within a web page. How do you configure Selenium WebDriver to work with different browsers? Configure WebDriver instances for different browsers, Chrome, Firefox, Edge, etc. using appropriate browser drivers, Chrome driver, Gecko driver, Edge driver, etc. WebDriver driver equal to new Chrome driver or WebDriver driver equal to new Firefox driver. What challenges do you face in cross-browser testing and how do you overcome them? Browser specific behaviors and rendering differences. Handling browser compatibility issues, ensuring consistent test results across different browsers. To overcome these challenges, use consistent and reliable locators, perform thorough testing on each browser, and use cross browser testing tools or services. Explain the usage of desired capabilities in Selenium WebDriver. Desired capabilities are used to configure WebDriver instances with specific browser and platform settings. They allow setting properties like browser name, version, platform, proxy settings, etc. Desired capabilities, desired capabilities.chrome, capabilities.set capability, browser version, latest, driver equal to new Chrome driver capabilities, framework specific questions. Explain how to integrate Selenium WebDriver with TestNG using the page object model. Create separate page classes for each web page using the page object model. Implement test cases in TestNG using these page classes to interact with web elements. Use TestNG annotation to define test methods, groups, priorities, etc. and run tests using TestNG XML. How do you implement logging in Selenium WebDriver using log4j? Add log4j dependencies to the project. Configure log4j properties file for logging settings. Use log4j logger to log messages in test scripts. Import org.apache log4j logger equal to logger get class logger.info. This is an info message. What is the role of TestNG listeners in Selenium WebDriver and automation? TestNG listeners are used to customize and extend the test execution behavior. They allow performing actions before and after test methods, suites, classes, etc., and provide additional logging, reporting, or assertion capabilities. How do you handle test data management in Selenium WebDriver? Manage test data in external files like Excel sheets, CSV files, JSON, XML, or databases. Use data provider in TestNG to supply test data to test methods. Implement data-driven testing approaches to execute tests with multiple datasets. What is the significance of dependency injection in Selenium WebDriver? Dependency injection is not directly related to Selenium WebDriver but can be used to manage dependencies and facilitate modular and flexible test automation frameworks. It allows injecting dependencies like WebDriver instances, page objects, or test data into test classes or methods. Performance testing. Can Selenium WebDriver be used for performance testing? Selenium WebDriver is primarily used for functional testing of web applications. While it can be used to measure certain performance metrics like page load time, it's not a dedicated performance testing tool. What are the limitations of using Selenium WebDriver for performance testing? Lack of built-in support for performance testing features like load generation, stress testing, and performance monitoring. Inability to simulate real user behavior and concurrency at scale. How do you measure page load time using Selenium WebDriver? Use JavaScript executor to execute JavaScript code to measure page load time. Long start time, long JavaScript executor driver execute script, return window performance, timing, navigation start, long load time equal to system current time millis minus start time. What tools or frameworks do you recommend for performance testing in conjunction with Selenium WebDriver? Use dedicated performance testing tools like JMeter, Gatling, Apache Benchmark, etc. in conjunction with Selenium WebDriver for comprehensive performance testing. Explain the advantages of using Selenium WebDriver for load testing. Selenium WebDriver can be used for load testing to simulate user interactions and measure the performance of web applications under load. It provides flexibility in scripting complex user scenarios and handling dynamic web content. Security testing. How can Selenium WebDriver be used for security testing? Selenium WebDriver can be used to automate security testing tasks like input validation, authentication testing, session management testing, and security scanning using tools like OWASP Zap. What are the common security vulnerabilities like that Selenium WebDriver can detect? Selenium WebDriver can detect common security vulnerabilities like cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery, SQL injection, broken authentication, insecure direct object references, etc. by simulating user interactions and analyzing web page responses. How do you simulate a security attack using Selenium WebDriver? You can simulate security attacks like XSS, cross-site scripting, or SQL injection by injecting malicious payloads into input fields or URLs and observing the application's behavior. What role does OWASP Zap play in security testing with Selenium WebDriver? OWASP Zap Attack Proxy is an open source security testing tool used for finding security vulnerabilities in web applications. It can be integrated with Selenium WebDriver to automate security scanning tasks and identify vulnerabilities during testing. Explain how to perform SQL injection testing using Selenium WebDriver. SQL injection testing involves injecting SQL queries into input fields to manipulate the database backend. Selenium WebDriver can simulate this by entering malicious SQL payloads into input fields and analyzing the application's response. Continuous integration. How do you integrate Selenium WebDriver tests with Jenkins? Integrate Selenium WebDriver tests with Jenkins by creating Jenkins job that executes test scripts as part of the build process. Use plugins like Selenium WebDriver plugin or configure Jenkins to execute test scripts using build, steps, or shell commands. What are the benefits of using Selenium WebDriver with CI/CD pipelines? Early detection of bugs and issues, faster feedback on code changes, automated regression testing, improved test coverage, seamless integration with continuous deployment pipelines. How do you ensure the stability and reliability of Selenium WebDriver tests in a CI/CD environment? Use robust synchronization techniques, implement reliable locators, execute tests on stable environments, properly handle dynamic content and pop ups, monitor test execution and results. Explain the importance of parallel test execution CI/CD with the Selenium WebDriver. Parallel test execution reduces overall test execution time, increases test coverage by running tests concurrently, helps identify concurrency related issues, optimizes resource utilization. How do you handle test reporting in a CI/CD pipeline with Selenium WebDriver? Use reporting plugins like Extent Reports, Allure, or integrate with CI/CD platforms like Jenkins, Bamboo, or GitLab CI to generate test reports. Include detailed information like test results, screenshots, logs, and failure reasons. Miscellaneous. How do you handle dynamic content in Selenium WebDriver? Use dynamic locators like XPath or CSS selectors. Implement explicit waits to wait for dynamic content to load. Use JavaScript executor to interact with dynamic elements. What is the purpose of the browser profiling in Selenium WebDriver? Browser profiling helps in analyzing browser performance, memory usage, network activity, and identifying bottlenecks. It's useful for optimizing test execution and troubleshooting browser related issues. How do you handle pop up windows in Selenium WebDriver? Use WebDriver methods like getWindowHandles to switch to pop up windows. Handle JavaScript alerts using the alert instance interface. For other types of pop-ups, the use in actions class or JavaScript executor to interact with them to handle pop-ups. What strategies do you use to maintain test scripts in Selenium WebDriver? Use version control systems like Git to track changes, follow coding standards and best practices, implement modularization and abstraction using page object model, regularly review and refactor test scripts. How do you handle CAPTCHA challenges in Selenium WebDriver? It's challenging to automate CAPTCHA challenges as they are designed to prevent automation. Use CAPTCHA solving services or human intervention for CAPTCHA verification in automated tests. This is very important. We do it again. How do you handle CAPTCHA challenges in Selenium WebDriver? It's challenging to automate CAPTCHA challenges as they are designed to prevent automation. Use CAPTCHA solving services or human intervention for CAPTCHA verification in automated tests. Coding challenges. Write a Selenium WebDriver script to validate the title of a web page. String expected title equal to expected title, string actual title driver.get title assert equals actual title expected title. Implement a Selenium WebDriver script to verify the presence of an element on a web page. Web element equal to driver, find element by id element id, assert true element dot is displayed. Write a Selenium WebDriver script to automate the login process of a web application. Driver.find element by ID username, send keys username, driver.find element by ID password, send keys password, driver.find element by ID login button dot click. Implement a Selenium WebDriver script to select a value from a drop down menu. Select drop down equal to new select driver dot find element by ID drop down dot select by visible text option. Write a Selenium WebDriver script to capture a screenshot of a web page. File screenshot, take screenshot driver, get screenshot as output file utis dot copy file, screenshot new file screenshot.png. Implement a Selenium WebDriver script to handle frames on a web page. Driver.switch to frame name, perform actions on the frame, driver.switch to default content. We do it again. Implement a Selenium WebDriver script to handle frames on a web page. Driver.switch to frame name, perform action on the frame, driver.switch to default content. Write a Selenium WebDriver script to handle file uploads. A web element or upload element. Driver equal to driver find element by ID upload element dot send keys path to file text. Implement a Selenium WebDriver script to verify the broken links on a web page. List of web element links equal to driver.find elements by dot tag name a for web element links string href equal to link dot get attribute href verify href is not empty and does not return a 404 error. Write a Selenium WebDriver script to handle browser navigation back forward refresh driver.navigate to https example.com driver.navigate back driver.navigate forward driver.navigate refresh. Implement a Selenium WebDriver script to perform drag and drop action on a web page. Web element source equal to driver find element by ID source, web element target equal to driver find element by ID target, actions equal to new actions driver actions dot drag and drop source target build perform.